tampon.
Something's missing. Today's pork. What's missing? 31% of the fat, 14% of the calories. Taste what you could be missing. Pork, the other white meat.
When Danny inherits a fortune, will the loving relatives contest the will?
The brakes don't work.
I can't die now. I'm rich.
P.S. I Love You, next.
They will get one chance to determine the fastest in the world. It will happen at Val d'Isère, on a mountain whose slope is so demanding, it may produce the most spectacular Olympic downhill ever. The Olympic Winter Games are coming to CBS. Share a moment with the world.
When you host a holiday party, choose a designated driver before any drinking begins. Make the designated driver the life of the party.
General, the U.S. Pacific Fleet was considered a threat by the Japanese, who were at war in 1940 and 41. They thought the U.S. had no business in the Pacific to begin with. And they hotly resented the embargo President Roosevelt had imposed on shipments of oil and scrap iron to Japan, things they needed to fuel their war machine.
Yes, the Japanese military strategy called for the execution of what they called the Southern Plan. That's the invasion of Dutch East Indies, Malaya, and the Philippines. Admiral Yamamoto clearly understood that they couldn't execute their Southern Plan without bringing the United States into war. And when that happened, you would have a superior Pacific fleet attacking directly into the flank of their Southern force invasion. They recognized that they had to destroy the Pacific Fleet first.
Three important figures arrived in Honolulu in 1941. Two came with fanfare. Lieutenant General Walter C. Short to command the Army, and Admiral Husband E. Kimmel to be commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet.
It shall be my personal motto or guiding principle to maintain the fleet at the highest level of efficiency and preparedness, and that whatever expansion is ordered, I will attempt to carry it out to the best of my ability.
Neither Kimmel nor Short believed an attack on Pearl Harbor to be within the realm of possibility. The third man came to plan the attack. He arrived in obscurity as a minor secretary of the Japanese consulate. He called himself Morimura. His real name was Tadeo Yoshikawa, ensign of the Imperial Japanese Navy. He cut an innocent, boyish figure on the Honolulu streets. He was the most important spy in the world.
Yeah, I'm the main culprit. I went to Hawaii when I was 29. I'm 80 years old now, and I'm still proud of myself for doing such a good job.
We found Yoshikawa this year, old and sick and forgotten, in a Japanese nursing home.
I didn't do it for money or to get ahead. I did it for Japan, and I'm proud I was a spy. I didn't always go straight to Pearl Harbor. I made a rule to go to Waikiki. The sailors all went there as soon as they landed. The names of their ships were printed on their caps, so I knew which ships were in port.
Yoshikawa was one of the most obvious spies in the world. He was a spy out of a Hollywood grade B movie. He was a Mr. Moto. He was a man who hung around with geishas, who drank heavily in the evenings, who joined a fencing club and tried to pump American officers about their military strategy. He took glass-bottom boat trips through Kaneohe in the harbor in Kaneohe, looking for the depth of the harbor. He swam into Pearl Harbor breathing through a reed to find out where the submarine nets were. He went on long hikes through the cane fields over Pearl Harbor. You would think that he would be the first spy apprehended by the FBI, but he was never caught.
The FBI paid no attention to Japan's low-level diplomats. They were not considered clever enough to do harm. Instead, American authorities kept watch over the 160,000 Japanese settlers in the islands, looking for signs of disloyalty.
The military were obviously very suspicious of local Japanese. They thought there was some kind of inside explosion about to happen.
Some fairly high-standing social characters here, even official characters, said, consider the Japanese unassimilated and unassimilable. Yeah, the yellow peril business.
The peril was not the clerks and gardeners of Hawaii. From the Japanese consulate on Nuuanu Avenue, the spy, Yoshikawa, was methodically telling the Japanese high command everything it needed to know. An urgent question to him from Tokyo, delivered on a crumpled ball of rice paper. On what day of the week are most ships in Pearl Harbor? Yoshikawa replied, Sunday. Admiral Yamamoto received this information in early November. He was familiar with the writings of Sun Tzu, who declared in 500 BC, all warfare is based on deception. If the enemy leaves a door open, you must rush in.
Yamamoto's plan to catch his enemy by surprise derived from old samurai traditions, but his tactics were completely modern. He understood that aircraft carriers were now the most powerful weapon in any navy. He didn't plan an attack with just one carrier. He assembled a strike force of 6 carriers. Nothing like this had ever been done before. He had the classic advantage of the attacker over the defender, and that is simply that he got to pick the time and the place of the attack. That's why he felt there was a gamble worth taking. The greatest of strategists are those who take a move which could result in their own self-destruction. In other words, that is the ultimate in strategic surprise. When you do something that is the unthinkable to the enemy.
In Tokyo, Japan's warlord Hideki Tojo called upon the emperor to say, matters have reached the point that Japan must begin war with the United States. The emperor did not dissent. The United States military knew something was up. The Japanese diplomatic code had been broken, and in the decoded cables was the whisper of war in the wind. On November 27th, 10 days before the attack, Washington fired off messages to Hawaii. One of them began, "This is to be considered a war warning." You would think that would have been hard to ignore, but Admiral Kimmel managed to ignore it.
If I'd been in the same position and some fellow came running through the door and said, hey, Schwarzkopf, got this little piece of information that indicates that the Japanese may be attacking Pearl Harbor tomorrow, it would have gotten my attention, let me put it that way. It would have gotten my attention, but I would have asked an awful lot of questions. And I would have done what Kimmel did. Kimmel turned to his staff officers every time he got this and said, here's this, here's this Pearl Harbor thing. What do you think about this? And the staff officers were saying, particularly as Chief of Plans and Operations, saying, absolutely not.
And when the Army commander, General Short, got his warning from Washington, he misunderstood it completely. He thought it meant protect yourself against the local Japanese.
He ordered that ammunition be locked up and kept in locked boxes. He ordered that planes be grouped together on the tarmac in an anti-sabotage formation, taken out of their revetments. He ordered a whole series of anti-sabotage drills that were held right up through December 6th. And it turned out there was not a single act of sabotage on December 7th. If anybody sabotaged General Short's defenses, it was General Short himself.
Admiral Kimmel and General Short spent the remainder of their lives trying to explain at Pearl Harbor. Kimmel's sins were sins of omission, Short's sins were sins of commission. Kimmel didn't do anything when he got this message, didn't send the patrols out, which would have detected the Japanese fleet and therefore given early warning. On the other hand, Short did something, he just did the wrong thing.
Then, on December 2nd, Admiral Kimmel was told by his intelligence officers that they had lost track of 2 divisions of Japanese aircraft carriers.
Do you mean to say that they could be rounding Diamond Head and you wouldn't know it?
Well, his officer responded, I would hope they would be sighted before that.
Nobody figured that you could take carriers all the way from Japan and launch them 300 miles from Kauai and launch them in such a way that they would be able to attack. And we had become careless to the extent we did not even have nets in front of our battleship.
I was aboard the USS Utah. We had heard rumors, you know, they're going to be a war. So the Japanese wouldn't dare. And the rumors were, you know, they couldn't see well, they couldn't fight at night, they couldn't shoot, they know nothing about navigation, they'd run over each other at sea, you know. All fantasies. We did not know the Japanese.
This overconfidence reached a crescendo in the last couple of days before the attack. On December 4th in Washington, Secretary of the Navy Knox said, whatever happens, the U.S. Navy is not going to be caught napping. 2 days later, Senator Brewster of Maine said the United States Navy can beat anybody else, anytime, any place. Now, comments like these were immediately reported back to the islands on the wire service and reinforced the delusions in Hawaii that people were living in a Gibraltar.
I was in the Army Air Corps. I joined up when I was 21. I went to Hawaii immediately. I remember that the week before the attack, I had read an article in one of the leading magazines that may have been Saturday Evening Post or Conyers, whatever. It was called Impregnable Pearl Harbor.
The biggest mistake you can ever do is assume away the capabilities of your enemy. If you got a plan, plan on the worst case. If you plan on the worst case, then you're always going to be ready. If you do best case planning, you're going to be in trouble somewhere along the way. And that's what we were doing, was best case planning.
I do remember that I noticed in one of the newspapers, deep inside the paper, page 5 or 6 or something, a tiny little squib about that said that the Japanese Navy had disappeared. And I thought, I wonder where it went.
The Japanese fleet set sail with an exceptional deception plan, shuffling around the call signs of all their ships, so anyone listening would think it was one type of ship when it was actually a completely different type of ship in a different location. They sailed a northern route that took them through rough seas and frigid weather, but there were no other ships on that route to detect them. It was a masterpiece of planning and execution.
It was said that the Pearl Harbor mission was a gamble. We thought our chances were 50-50. My name is Zenji Abe. I was a senior lieutenant of the dive bomber squadron assigned to the carrier Akagi. We practiced every day. We didn't know if we would die or get home alive. My first son had been born 6 months before. I had a photograph of my wife holding the baby. I decided to bring the picture with me on my mission and wrote a last will and testament in a letter to my wife, asking her to raise our son well and to live on in good health.
The point of no return was passed. From command headquarters in Japan, Admiral Yamamoto sent his fleet a call to battle.
The moment has arrived. The rise or fall of our empire is at stake.
He was a gambler. He really was. He loved to gamble. Even when he was in London, he loved to gamble. And the Pearl Harbor attack was a gamble for him. My name is Yozo Fujita. I was 24 years old, a fighter pilot on the aircraft carrier Soryu. When I first heard that we were to attack Pearl Harbor, I thought my life wouldn't last very long. I had been thinking that if war started, we would die wherever we attacked.
On December 6th, President Franklin D. Roosevelt sent a cable to Hirohito. Both of us, he wrote,